Hi, I am UFUK CELIKCAN. I am a faculty member at the Department of Computer Engineering, Hacettepe University, Ankara, and also the head of the Computer Graphics and Game Studies Lab at the same department. Today, I will be talking about our group's efforts to enhance 3D vision experience with perceptually-based approaches. In this regard, our first effort was an approach for controlling stereo camera parameters in interactive 3D environments, in a way that specifically addresses the interplay of binocular depth perception and perceptual saliency of scene contents. This was an effort geared towards plano-stereoscopic displays. It was published in 2013 and won the Best Paper Award at Computer Graphics International 2013. In an interactive environment where the position of the camera is dynamically changing based on the user input, there is a need for an attention-aware control system to keep the perceived depth range in the comfortable target range. In this work, we aim to address the challenges of presenting a comfortable viewing experience in an interactive scene by controlling and limiting target depth range to the personal comfort zone of each individual viewer and eliminating accommodation convergence violations as much as possible. We call our approach Dynamic Attention-Aware Disparity Control, or shortly DADC. Our approach consists of a calibration phase followed by the main phase. In the calibration phase, the depth perception range of the user is obtained interactively. Perceived depth range is changeable in light of users' personal stereoscopic comfort limits. In order to capture these limits, the user designates the personal disparity extrema so that the disparity is not too high in order to avoid eye-straining visual artifacts like diplopia, or too low, resulting in low unsatisfactory depth field. This is performed only once per user before starting the interactive stage, during which the main phase takes place. Our method is an extension of the methods that control the depth range in a given scene, among which the most widely used one is depth range control, or DRC method, and our approach includes this to handle exceptional cases. It is possible to approximate the perceived disparity by geometrically modeling the stereoscopic vision with respect to a given depth range, which may be adjusted by the view. According to this approach, interaxial separation and convergence distance of the stereo camera pair can be formulated by using similar triangles in the stereo vision geometry. Previous approaches employing DRC had been based on mapping the depth range without consideration of the distribution of the objects of significance in the scene. Therefore, our idea was that employing DRC alone may not be sufficient for proper enhancement. In this regard, we developed an attention-aware system as follows. Here is the main phase of our approach. It consists of 3 consecutive stages, namely depth assessment, then scene analysis, and finally stereoscopic camera parameter update. First, in the depth assessment stage, we gather visible scene depth extrema information by a number of min-max reduction passes on the depth buffer in real time. This, in combination with data from the disparity calibration phase of the user, is fed into the optimization as system constraints and also used in the 2 special non-optimization cases. Then in the scene analysis stage, we have 2 assumptions. First, we assume that the users navigate towards scene elements that attract their attention more. And secondly, users tend to have significant elements centered in their view. In this stage, we gather 3 basic information. First, the significance score of the element, which we assume is assigned by the content creator. Then the forward distance of that element from the cameras, and the radial distance of that element from forward camera axis. Finally, in the stereoscopic camera parameter update stage, we introduced two energy functions, EO and ED. With EO, we aim to bring the convergence plane closer to the locus of attention, and with ED, we aim to maximize total scene disparity and in turn total perceived depth. We bring these two together in the total energy function E by properly normalizing them, so that by minimizing E, the system searches for the optimal parameter set, mediating the minimization of EO and the maximization of ED, thus seeking to keep significant scene elements inside the comfort zone while maximizing the perceived depth field. The system minimizes E subject to constraints Dmax and Dmin, which are obtained from the disparity calibration phase. The constraints ensure that during the optimization, scene depth is actively mapped into the perceivable depth range of the user as initially determined. As I mentioned, we also handle the spatial cases. For example, when there is only a single element of interest in the view, the system places the camera convergence plane at the distance of that element and computes interaxial separation using the DRC method. And when there is no element of interest in the view, the system switches to complete DRC. In addition, we apply a temporal control so that the changes in parameters occurring between consecutive frames are not considerably high or happening more frequently than tolerable. We made evaluations of our method in two different scenes. The first one was an indoor setting with limited depth range, and the second one was an urban outdoor setting that presented a more dynamic environment in terms of variety of characters and their actions as well. This outdoor setting had considerably a larger depth range. Our evaluation was based on pairwise comparisons to the depth range control method and the naive method. Here, the naive method used fixed stereo camera parameters. And the evaluation was on three criteria, namely image quality, perceived depth, and visual comfort. The results showed that our method led to considerable improvement in the stereoscopic image quality with respect to the naive and DRC methods. And it also led to improvements in perceived depth and visual comfort. However, these improvements weren't as significant. Results also showed that our method achieved the goal of keeping the most significant object closer to the screen as much as possible, and this helps to avoid accommodation convergence conflicts to a large extent. Our second work I'm going to be talking about is titled Enhancing VR Experience with RBF Interpolation-Based Dynamic Tuning of Stereoscopic Rendering. It has been published in Computers and Graphics Journal very recently. In this work, we shift our focus to immersive HMB displays and offer an approach that we found useful with authored 3D narratives. As it is well known, consumer-level HMDs enforce strict measures on the stereoscopic parameters to circumvent issues related to visual discomfort that can arise due to poor stereo rendering settings. This often leads to unimpressive VR experience with shallow depth field. Using radial basis in function interpolation and projection matrix manipulations, we propose a method of dynamic tuning of stereoscopic rendering parameters toward enhanced VR experience. Our approach consists of two parts, namely VR authoring and VR experience. While VR experience is the main part where our automatic camera control method takes place, it requires an arrangement of stereoscopic camera settings, or in other words, a depth layout. VR authoring interface is used to create these depth layouts. Users can promptly start their VR experience with an existing preset depth layout or use VR authoring interface to self-author their own depth layouts. In VR authoring, the user creates a unique design of stereoscopic cinematography, which is composed of a series of waypoint locations with designated camera angles and stereoscopic camera parameters. Here, the waypoint locations are represented by the yellow cubes in the figure. At the initialization of VR experience, the method calculates a smooth camera path between the authored waypoints and makes a scene-wide interpolation by fitting a surface for each of the stereoscopic camera parameters using radial basis functions based on the authored waypoints. During VR experience, automated stereoscopic camera control is realized on the path using the fitted surfaces of parameters by dynamic tuning of the projection matrices. We conducted a user study to evaluate our method with pairwise comparisons in two scenes against the default stereoscopic rendering settings of the HMD. For this, we used two different configurations. In one configuration, the subjects evaluated our approach with a preset depth layout that we created for that scene. And in the second configuration, they evaluated our approach with respect to the default setting with a self-authored depth layout that they themselves created. The results of the user study demonstrate that our method is able to significantly enhance user experience in terms of overall perceived depth and image quality. Even though our goal has been to boost VR experience by enhancement of overall perceived depth without decreasing visual comfort, the method is seen to be able to slightly improve visual comfort on average as well. However, this improvement is not found to be statistically significant. Our approach in its current state is limited. It is primarily intended for guided VR experiences such as VR walkthroughs or VR rides, and it is currently restricted to work on predefined camera paths. This way, it only allows for very limited interaction with the virtual environment. While we observed, as shown in this video, that using our method in a setting where the user is able to roam the environment freely without being restricted to a path can lead to promising preliminary results, further improvements to the proposed method are crucial for proper adaptation to use it in fully interactive VR applications with free viewing. While the previous works I talked about were aimed for enhancement of depth perception without decreasing visual comfort, this next work, which is still under progress, is a product of our quest for primarily aiming to mitigate cyber sickness explicitly in immersive head-mounted displays. In this work, we decided to make use of electroencephalogram, or shortly EEG. EEG is a promising biofeedback to grade cyber sickness as it is suitable for practical use, cost-effective, and not interrupting immersion during measurement. Brain activity is considered to be the most comprehensive and reliable psychological signal to detect cyber sickness-related cognitive load, and it is very rich in information. So we thought it can help us not only detect the onset of cyber sickness, but also deduce its cause so that it can be possible to mitigate cyber sickness by targeting that specific cause instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, because cyber sickness has a myriad of contributing factors. Accordingly, in this work, we propose an online system to detect cyber sickness from the viewer's EEG activity and to mitigate it by updating the factor parameters as per the feedback from the proposed neural models. We call this system cyber sickness detection and mitigation system. It operates during a VR experience in real time on EEG feedback with a two-stage shallow convolutional network. It considers three major VR cues, factoring in cyber sickness. These are namely navigation speed, scene complexity, and stereoscopic rendering parameters. Here we also introduce a procedurally generated virtual environment that can simulate these cues by tuning them online with the feedback from CDMS. Our approach consists of two phases: the model training phase shown on the top half and the feedback phase shown on the bottom half. In the feedback phase, CDMS is online. In the study for the model training phase, cyber sickness invoking cues of navigation speed, scene complexity, and stereoscopic rendering parameters were simulated separately with their predefined range of levels in the virtual environment where the participants are immersed in. EEG data and general discomfort scores of the participants were collected during the study sessions to train a two-stage shallow convolutional neural network model. In the feedback phase, the trained models are used within the CDMS loop to detect and mitigate cyber sickness in real time by updating the virtual environment generator simultaneously to adjust the identified factoring cue. In the model training phase experiment, after the personal baseline EEG acquisition, the participant experienced three types of cues in separate and randomly ordered scenes with 30-second rest periods between them. In this phase, the scenes take place within the same virtual environment, but each simulates a set of different cyber sickness cues in predefined sets of levels. That is 10 levels of navigation speed, 7 levels of scene complexity, and 10 sets of stereoscopic rendering parameters. Upon the conclusion of each level, participants were asked to rate the severity of experienced cyber sickness on a scale ranging from 1, representing none, to 7, representing extreme, using the VR interface. We call this rating general discomfort level. In the CDMS-only session, the parameters are initiated according to the control 2 sessions template. However, they were altered with respect to the EEG feedback from the user with the CDMS loop. Here you see the CDMS nets to models for cyber sickness detection and VRQ classification. Here we see the plots illustrating changes in the Q parameters. On the left, we see the parameter templates of control 1 session and control 2 session. And as I said before, the CDMS sessions parameters are initiated with respect to the control 2 session template. And in the middle, we see the resulting parameters as averaged over the participants who experienced cyber sickness during the CDMS session. And on the right, we see the results as averaged over the participants who did not experience cyber sickness in the CDMS session. So we are able to see that when subjects experience cyber sickness, CDMS intervenes and changes the parameters accordingly. But when the participants do not experience cyber sickness, the intervention is minimal or none. Here on the top left, we see the decoding accuracies of the cyber sickness detection and Q classification models. Accuracy was calculated by averaging over the overall accuracies obtained with 5-fold cross-validation training. It is seen that the models in both stages show superior performance with respect to the models in comparison. On the bottom row, we see the plots showing the ranges and the averages for the changes in simulator sickness questionnaire scores through the sessions and end of session general discomfort scores as averaged over the participants who experienced cyber sickness. It is seen that the CDMS session achieves the mitigation of cyber sickness by resulting in lower simulator sickness questionnaire scores and general discomfort scores. On the top right, we see that the results are statistically significant from each other in all scores through the sessions. In the first paper I presented, that was aimed for planostereoscopic displays, we accounted for visual saliency by simply relying on significance scores that are supposed to be assigned by content creators. In pursuit of a new method that can be used with virtual reality head-mounted displays in fully interactive settings, we thought about making use of visual saliency explicitly and without manual assignment of any kind. For this purpose, we wanted to first explore how certain visual saliency estimation methods and features work with virtual reality HMD viewing, and we came up with this study which got published in Computers and Graphics in 2020. It's titled Deep into Visual Saliency for Immersive VR Environments Rendered in Real Time. Here, we investigate a set of well-studied visual saliency features through 7 saliency prediction methods with the aim of assessing how applicable they are for estimating visual saliency in dynamic virtual reality environments that are experienced with head-mounted displays. An analysis of how the saliency methods that make use of depth cues compared to ones that are based on purely image-based features is presented. To this end, we conducted a user study to collect gaze data from participants as they were shown the same set of 3 scenes in 2D desktop viewing and 3D VR viewing using HMD. The methods we have used can be combined in 3 main categories. First, methods using boundary connectivity. Second, methods using depth cue. And third, generic image-based methods. For the user study, we created 3 scenes which were used for both viewing conditions. The first scene is an outdoor environment. It is a street with houses, trees, and animated humans. It has frames of high depth range and with attention-grabbing regions located on both further and closer parts with respect to the user's point of view. The second scene incorporates an abstract setting. In it, common 3-dimensional solids such as cubes or pyramids are statically displayed with plane textures as the camera moves through an L-shaped corridor. The third scene is an indoor environment. It is a classroom with desks, tables, computers, and animated humans. This also contains attention-grabbing regions, but these are more densely placed than the ones in the outdoor scene. The abstract scene and the indoor scene both depict enclosed spaces, and the frames in those scenes are of low to average depth range. Here we see the frames for which the ground truths of 2D and 3D viewing behaviors are the least similar in each scene. The results show that in 2D viewing, the BMS method is seen as leading in most metrics, followed by MBE and MB+ methods. In 3D viewing, however, MB and MB plus methods are shown to produce better prediction scores for the abstract and indoor scenes, as well as in overall averages, while BMS method is the most successful one for the outdoor scene, where the mean depth is the highest. Here we see the frame rates for each method, and the methods using depth Q seem to be considerably slower than the other methods, perhaps due to the need for generating depth maps for each frame. The results show us that center bias is more pronounced in 3D viewing. And comparison of eye fixations for 2D and 3D viewing indicate that closer regions attract more attention for 3D viewing. This validates that depth matters for 3D VR more than it does for 2D desktop viewing. 2D features matter as much as depth for both 2D and 3D, yet depth Q is slightly more important for 3D VR viewing. Including depth as an additional Q for the 2D settings methods often improves prediction for both viewing conditions, and the benefit margin is greater in 3D VR viewing. And this concludes my talk. Thank you all for listening.